appreciate you guys joining me here in my house because it's normally we'd have it in our podcast studio, but the podcast studio, the whole block had a power outage. So they told us 4 hours to get the digger and everything. So we have to do it here. But I really appreciate you guys coming nonetheless. And I can't wait to get talking about your films because they actually share quite a bit in common, despite the fact that they're about different characters and very different experiences in a way. But what they have in common, it seems to me, is that all of you want to tell a really, really important story, like something, a message that was actually really important to tell, and you decide to do it differently. But I'd like you guys to talk to me about how you got to this point. So let's start with you guys about your stories. So how did you get here? And rewind even further, as far as you can to bring you to this story.
So it's obviously based on a true story. So it was like I was assaulted when I was 16, and it was something that I always really wanted to make a film about. And it took many forms. It was a very different script when it first was written. It was like trying to be a feature. It had too many scenes, and it was like trying to be too big. And a lot of especially the middle section, which is now all shot on a 360 track, that was like loads of different scenes, like bulked out. And some people were like, this is kind of doing the same thing in each of these scenes. So like, why don't you like find a way of making that say one thing? But it took lots of different forms, and it was a very different film many times. But I guess the important thing was that we were like always trying to say was that like the red tape and the what's the word, like the bureaucracy around like assault and around communicating or like figuring out your trauma around it was so much that it was never human. It was like always a very like formal experience where I felt that people couldn't get past. It was hard for people to get past that because you can't even talk about it in a way. If you can't talk about it with the police or the people that you're trying to like improve the situation with, then how can you talk about it with people that around you, kind of thing?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the main point of always making a film.
And also the way that experience is being questioned and being asked to explain again is just quite traumatizing and re-traumatizing you and reminding you of that trauma and not giving, people who have suffered at the hands of such predators to like actually have space to talk about these things in a safe way that doesn't, bring you back to that place of trauma. So I think that's kind of what the sort of middle section was trying to look at, was how does the repetition of questioning actually lead to more trauma within Amy and the character.
Well, it's not a normal thing, right? To have to tell the same story over and over again. I mean, we filmmakers experience it a little bit when we do interviews about the projects, but as a normal person, and then to talk about something traumatic over and over and over again. I mean, at some point, is it numbing, or like, would you say it's worsening, or like, how would you describe that?
I think it's re-traumatizing. I mean, I think like in its purest form, that was what we were trying to do, is say that like none of these people communicate. They're all asking questions that kind of counteract each other, or like, or ask the same things. If there was a world in which the police and the medical services and the teachers or around young people that have assault spoke to each other and came up with a solution together, then it would be like an amazing thing that you could push people forward and support them, rather than just like make it painful for the victim, or I don't like to say victim, survivor. It's not really a good word for people who have experienced it.
For me, of course, as a man, the most compelling part was how would he react, and if she actually said something or if she didn't. And of course, it's a confusing thing to experience your partner being as distraught as they are and not knowing what is going on. Something you can definitely relate to, but I've always managed to find a way to have a conversation with my partners. But what if it's something they don't want to talk about? And I thought that was a very compelling way to end it, is on that question. It's like, does she say something, and what does she say, and how does he react? What was your sort of perspective on giving the male perspective on this one? Because obviously you're telling the story from one person. Where do you find the boyfriend's role come in on her experience.
I think it's kind of like, it's part of the same middle ground. Like, although he's not photographed in the way that the police and like the medical services are, the bureaucracy is. It's kind of this. It's like reiterating the same point of like, how do you speak? How do you speak? Really, like, how do you talk about this? And even though his one comes from like a loving space, like it's still, or maybe it doesn't. I mean, he's not that loving in it, but but even though it comes from like an intimate space, it's like, how do you communicate to people around you that this has happened?
Mm-hmm.
And Amy's rebuilding trust around, you know, the way that she's sort of the 16-year-old who wants to kind of reclaim her sort of sexuality and reclaim that, and she tries that, and as soon as those lines cross, it kind of becomes confusing. But you have to remember that, you know, Amy and, oh my God, what's his name in the movie? Lewis, yeah, sorry. We didn't ever get called by his name. Amy and Lewis, you know, they're teenagers, and ultimately they don't have the language to discuss this because it's you know, there's no language for so many people to understand consent and what that means. So, of course, there's no way for them to have that dialogue because they don't know how to. Mm-hmm. And so Amy tries to fix it with her kind of, she tries to be really sexual, and well, not really sexual, but she tries to like be intimate with him, and that kind of doesn't really work. But I think it's interesting that he isn't there to kind of give her space. He kind of does give her space, but it sort of comes from a place of frustration because he's like a teenage boy who just wants to play FIFA and not have to talk about anything that's big and real, because that's absolutely terrifying, and people don't like talking about trauma because it's terrifying to do so.
I mean, it's to segue a little bit to your film here. I mean, that kind of a traumatic situation has very strong long-term effects on mental health and stuff like that. And you're clearly talking about mental illness in your film.
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone. Like, I came across the poem by an amazing spoken word artist called Neil Hilborn, who wrote the poem that the film was obviously an adaptation of. And, you know, I had my own, you know, idiosyncrasies, and like, I don't suffer with the level of obsessive compulsive disorder that Neil obviously suffers with, that made him write that incredible poem. But I suffer with certain things, and I've always been sort of interested in mental health, and especially like going into filmmaking, I've always been interested in how the psychological side of one's self really can be projected on, like, using the language of visual photography and sound and everything, and filmmaking really. And so when I came across the poem, I connected with it on quite a deep level because of how I relate to it, but also it was different, like, from how I am and how he felt. And even though there was that difference, there was still quite a deep connection, and I just kept it in my mind. I was at film school when I saw it. I didn't have the tools to, at least I thought about it, to make a film, but I always thought that'd be an amazing short, you know, because it's kind of like, it just had everything there, you know, if you visualise the poem, then you know, sort of half done already. And then, yeah, just one of them where it stayed in my mind for years, and then I got out of uni and I was working as an editor, but I always, you know, wanted to move into directing, like, properly. And I thought, you know, I was one of them where I was like, I need to make something, like, no one's going to give me anything. And I was like, what can I literally scramble together? And this poem had just been ringing in my head for a few years, and I thought, you know, those are the ones that don't go away, really. I was like, I need to do something about this. So I, like, thought about, could it work as a film? Then I sort of contacted Neil over Twitter, and it was all very informal, and like, it was like, cool man, like, go away kind of thing. And he didn't really seem that bothered. I think he thought I was just some kid. I think other people had even done little, like, TikTok almost adaptations of it and stuff. But I was like, I want to do this as like a proper film. I'm a director, like, here's my and he was like, yeah, cool. Like, and then you know, it's just, I really was interested in the kind of how specific the lens was on life, and especially relationships, and how mental health, and in this case OCD, kind of dictated his whole life, and kind of the cyclical nature of relationships on a universal level was kind of shown here in like a minute, like 5 minute, like, because what I thought was really interesting was how we can connect to it through people that have their own OCDs or, like, you know, mental health. But then also there was this, like, universal level where I almost felt that on a kind of deeper level that the film encapsulates every single person's relationships with intimate partners in a way that is so original, like, because I feel like the film is kind of a lot about how the things that you kind of adore about someone, or that draws you to someone or creates that special connection, those very same things in the beginning are always almost the things that unravel you in the end, like if you were to sort of go your separate ways. And I think in this case it's to do with his, you know, his mental health and obsessive compulsive disorder, but in a way isn't, you know, that removed. There's still, isn't that what all relationships are really? Like, you know, the things in the beginning that you love about someone are like, oh, they're endearing, cute, kind of. By the end, those can be the things that, you know, that person can't stand about you, or vice versa. And I thought that was really interesting, that how it was such a specific lens, but it was also universal. So I could kind of tap into people that would relate on an actual level to OCD and to mental health, but also to hopefully a much wider audience, just on relationships and how the cyclical nature of relationships that people seem to go through.
I mean, both your films deal with the consequences of on relationships, whereas of course you sort of pose the question, how do you talk about it? Your film goes into that. One thing that I enjoyed about the poem and the film as a whole is that the story doesn't present. He knows that it can be a problem.
Yeah.
But he doesn't see it in itself only as a problem. You know, he's like, what I have can be special to you. You know, so why can't it be special to you? And the question is, why don't you understand that? And I think that's the same question that your film asks as well: is why can't you understand what I'm going through? You know what I mean? And was that sort of the goal, is to at least try to bring some understanding to what that means, what you're going through. Is that what you guys were aiming at, basically?
Yeah, I guess it's more just like understanding for sure, but like more like how do you start a conversation, like less than understanding, because I feel like because if you could say it, I think like everyone understands once you've said it, but it's like, how do you breathe when you don't have the words, or you're so scared about what the implications are of what you say, then how do you start the conversation, rather than like, I think everyone understands once you get there. It's just approaching it.
So where do you start is your question.
Yeah, it's like what's the first words that come out of your mouth to tell someone that you've been assaulted, like especially someone you're in a relationship with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about the making of the films. You guys both approached the making to a certain extent, but I would like to find out from you how you got the projects off the ground. You know, so clearly you guys had scripts and stuff like that, but I'd like to find out how you approached getting the films made and what ended up coming out of that. So let's start with that. So how did the project come to you, and how did it get off the ground?
I think, Molly and I were friends, and then I knew that she was doing a project, and you raised some money through the NFTS, where you went to film school, and
auction.
Molly did this amazing art auction where she put she got 30 female artists to donate their work, and then on Instagram did like an auction, so people would every day sort of put in a bid, and the bids would go up, and I got quite involved in helping with the auction, and also spent loads of money on the auction, so I was like, this is so great. So I ended up with some really nice artwork, which wasn't the plan. It was like,
that was
that was before I came on as a producer. I just got really into the auction, and actually Molly had sent me a draft, and I think I was like, no, because I was like, I'm not going to do any more short films. I'm very busy, which is just what I'm doing. I've done like 3 this year without by accident.
But accident. Okay, we're going to get to this accident a bit later. But and then you sent a new draft, or I was just like, oh, let's just do it. Let's just make this.
it's great. It's a really important project, really important thing. So Molly sort of came with half the funding, and at the time we'd sort of done a budget that was going to work for that. And then we really fortunately partnered with DMC, who are an amazing company, really brilliant producer called Theo there, who sort of came on board and really championed the project from really early on. And Theo had a partnership with a social media company called Vera, and they very kindly supported the film. So we sort of went in. When did we shoot? Like 2019?
August.
2019?
No,
2018?
2018.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, because I think so. No, 2019.
2019. Yeah, because then we finished it by the end of the year.
2020 ruined everything.
Yeah, 2020, it's like, what happened?
Exactly. We don't know what time is anymore.
Yeah.
Everything happened a long time ago and really recently at the same time. Yeah. So 2018-19-ish.
Yeah,
one of those years
is when it happened.
Pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic, and we'd worked really hard on the scripts. I think the iteration of the script that we ended up shooting was sort of 4 or 5 or 6 even, like version.
Way different
20.
to what.
It was very different to what the original script was, and that was a really fun part of the process, sort of developing it, developing the characters.
How long did you guys manage to sort of go through that process before you decide to shoot it?
I think realistically it was like
Quick, I think. No,
I don't think so. I think the first draft you ever wrote, the draft that we shot, was probably like 3 years.
I think
it was
more than
5
that.
years.
5 years.
Right.
I think when I first came up with the idea was when I left Bournemouth.
Right.
So that was and that was a kind of a want to just like talk about the subject and a need to kind of like tell people without being like, by the way, it was like more like, I'm making this film and it's about this because this happened. And so so that was when I left Bournemouth, and then we made it 5 years after that.
But I think from when I came onto when we shot was about a year.
Yeah.
And the script was changing probably up until about a month before we shot, I think. Which is actually a really valuable lesson of having, when I did it, the first short films I ever made, sort of got a script and was like, I have a script, let's make it. We've got the hardest thing, we've got a script, it's perfect, let's go. And actually having worked and understood more about storytelling and like that process of interrogating your story and understanding why you're doing something and what the meaning of it and the value of it and whether or not everything makes sense in this narrative arc, all those things that you just don't really think about when you're first starting out because you're so excited to get a camera and you're so ready to be like, let's go, let's make something that's just so exciting. And actually, I think with Good Thanks to You, it was a really good process of really interrogating the story and making sure it all worked and making sure the visual language tied into the kind of narrative. And that was it really. And then once we had the funding, it was pretty like 6 months. The casting was a really important part of that. Finding the right people to hold the story, especially because it was so important. And personal to Molly, it was important to find a cast who could really hold on to that.
Of course.
Then
shooting, how long did you guys shoot for?
3 days.
It was only 2 days.
Yeah.
Wow. And the editing process?
Was long. I mean, I found the editing process the most difficult. I mean, the most traumatic because not only are you watching, like the way we shot it is so secular and like so like traumatic intentionally, then to do that and watch it again and again in an edit, it was like, this is heavy, and like try stuff out, but we edited for a while. I think I have actually no idea.
I think we edited for several months, like 4 or 5 months, but I mean on and off.
On and off.
Yeah, of course. But...
just like around everyone's availability. And actually, you know what, to be honest, I think in terms of short film edits, it was pretty fast.
I honestly can't remember. It felt like a long time to me, but I probably wasn't.
Time perception is maybe a bit different when you're so into it.
It was really one of those films. I mean, the classic cliche of like you edit a film 3 times, of like you edit a script point and then shoot point and then edit point. But it really was that like we, making the 360 work and piecing bits together, and like then ADRing or like finding words from like different bits of the script and the film. Like we really like worked it as hard as we did in the script stage as we did in the edit.
What was it like for you? What was your process I mean, you said you had the poem idea early, but from how long did it take you to write the script and then?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting actually. It's sort of contrast to sort of methods, if you like, because me and Molly went to the same university, like BA film school, like in Bournemouth. And in your third year there, you get to do kind of like also the big grad film, which is kind of like they follow the format of like an FTS and like sort of your thesis for your big grad film. And I sort of directed a film there that was like kind of my first film, like proper, because when I went to Bournemouth, I didn't actually know, I want to be a director. I kind of like really discovered it there, like what a director did, and like, I almost thought, I'll be a cinematographer. I was like, because I like cameras, I made like skate videos and stuff when I was younger. But when I got to Bournemouth, and I always been interested in cinema and writing, and then I kind of figured out what a director. I was like, he or she like can be the person that works with the actors and like is still involved in the visual kind of and everything, but like very different from what a cinematographer is like. And I kind of felt myself leading away from some of the cinematography students who just knew what they were doing, like, and I was like, I don't know anything about like lights and stuff. I'm way more interested in story, and then I was like, there wasn't really a writing kind of part of Bournemouth, so I was like, I guess I'll try the directing, but then it was kind of like competitive. But luckily I got to a place where I directed this kind of grad film, and it was kind of the most like amazing experience of like my life. That's where I really discovered like something that I really wanted to do, and I was like, hang on, this could be like my true passion in like career and life, like. And I had such a great time, and we made this short film, and it was kind of around 20 minutes, and it was a bit rough around the edges, and like, but it was like it kind of worked as a story almost, and people responded to it. We have screenings, and I was like, this is amazing. I was like, I really want to do this. And I'd had a bit of history of like editing as well, because I kind of grew up doing skate videos and stuff. And then I got fired out of uni, and I was like, right, I'm going to be a director. Like, next short, like I'm going to get some funding, and then that one will be that, and then I'll do a feature, and then guess what everyone kind of does. And then kind of did the festival circuit with that grad film, and it was kind of doing alright. I did a few things here and there, and I was like, it was quite exciting. It was all fun. And then like that kind of ended, and I was kind of like waiting for that thing for the next thing, and it just kind of never came really, like, because when you look back, you're just still so like young and sort of starting out. You kind of think you think you're maybe a few steps further than you actually really are, even if you feel like it's going good at that time. And then I kind of got the job as an editor in this kind of in-house content kind of commercials company, and I was kind of cutting my teeth there for a couple of years, and so I'll get to the actual main point now. But I got to a point where I was just I was so frustrated at, I just felt the directing and the storytelling inside of me slipping away, and I was just becoming like an editor for content stuff. And I was like, the feeling that I had at Bournemouth, where you really felt like a collective of filmmakers, like scriptwriters, DOPs, sound designers, composers, editors, like, that world was like
working on
the mini film industry that gets you kind of going to go and do it for real. And I kind of lost that for a couple of years coming out of Bournemouth, even though I'd had such a great time with my grad film and stuff. And I was just in such a place of like, I don't know how to reconnect with that kind of side of myself, even, or like the people that made the films at uni with, and they were going off and starting to do stuff. And it really just came from a point of like, I literally came to a kind of close. I like quit my job, like, and I was like, I'm just going to use what money I have to make this short film, and then I'm going to move to London and fire it out and try and do that, because I'm from Brighton, so I was still in Brighton after uni. So I had the poem ticking over in my head, and I was like writing it as a screenplay kind of adaptation form to try and show people that it could work as a film. Couldn't get any funding anywhere. I had a few chats with like random acts and stuff, but then things just never went anywhere. And then one day I just kind of, it all came to a head. I was like, I'm going to leave my job that was taking all my time and take a bit of time out and just shoot this film, like lo-fi, like get my friends from uni, like cinematographer, sound designer, composer, like I'll direct it, I'll edit it as well. And it was like a 2-day shoot over a weekend that I blagged everyone to come down to Brighton for free. And like, my mum made the catering, and like, it was all very like, lo-fi student stuff. And it was quite fun to do it, because it was like the same uni gang. We were basically doing the same thing as before, but almost with even less money than when we'd done it at uni. But everyone reconnected with each other, and it was like a really great experience, and it was really fun to get back into that. And then so we all did it like super lo-fi, and then I was seeing.
How long did you guys film?
2 days, like
2
so it
days,
was
wow.
Saturday, Sunday, like when people weren't working the week and stuff. And I was
So
like,
you literally just called all your mates.
yeah, it was like it couldn't have
Let's
been
shoot some
more.
shit.
It couldn't have been more like I produced it myself. I'm not a producer like at all, but I just did enough to the format of the film was very visceral and kind of psychological represent, but the actual logistics could be quite simple. So I hired an Airbnb that was near the seafront, and then I was like, well, that means I've got 7 locations. I've got a bedroom, I've got a living room, I've got a bathroom, I've got a seafront. I was like, I've got 7 locations. That gives it a bit of scope. But in reality, I had nothing. Do you know what I mean? I had just this Airbnb, and then next to
fake it till you make it.
yeah, and then we just circulated that area for 2 days, shooting stuff. And we were dependent on weather and all things like that. So I remember the first day was we were meant to shoot all the beach stuff, where it's kind of ethereal. His first view of her, there's kind of this almost ethereal moment of where he discovers her there. And I was like, yeah, it's going to look kind of how it does in the film. It's going to be sort of sunny and the waves will be crashing and with this warm kind of hue to it. We got there, it was the first thing to shoot with everyone. And also it's thanks for coming. No one's getting paid, no one's doing anything. And it was pissing it down with rain. And I was like, oh, maybe I could rework this to it would be all stormy. And I had sat in this van and I nearly just had a breakdown. So I was I brought all these people and it's already. And then my cinematographer, he was like, don't worry, we've got the Airbnb, so we'll go and shoot some interior stuff and then come back. And then the weather changed, and so it really was a roller coaster of just grab it while you can, but it really it was really not done in a way that you would expect, like a commercial or feature,
Would you
all over the place, but it was a great experience.
Considering how ad hoc your shoot ended up being, because you had to basically get whatever you could in the 2 days that you had, would you say your film was made in the edit as well? That you knew what you were aiming at, but you found the film in the edit?
Yeah, another thing we kind of want to go into is with that kind of logistics of the shoot was so chaotic, I really wanted to make sure that didn't reflect in the film. So what I'm sort of going into is my previous short film has been a much longer kind of over 20 minute kind of people would mini show that you could do something that could maybe be an episode of television. You kind of want to show that you could be eventually in charge of a feature film or something. And this was the opposite, because I found where that film was rough around the edges, where I'd let things roll too long. I was just getting soaked up in the material too much. I wanted to make something that was much more stronger in its form. And so I was very wary of not doing too much handheld, and I wanted the visual storytelling to be every frame was composed to how I would want to represent that line of the poem or that part of the story, or to emphasise an emotion or etc. So even though the shoot was chaotic, we're going there, we're going back there, I knew every setup was kind of very planned. And I really wanted it to be way more composed than anything I'd done before. So it was kind of they were opposites. The shoot was chaos and running around, but when we did when we set up to do each setup, I did have an exact thing of and that's why in the edit it kind of came together, because it was very planned, it was meticulous, but it was meticulous done in chaos, which is
organized chaos.
Filmmaking at the end of the day, that's what it is.
It's completely true. So you funded this out of your own pocket then?
Yeah. So
what was your budget?
I think we had $2,000.
$2,000?
Yeah.
What did you guys have for yours?
I think it ended up in
23.
Oh, there we go.
23
said
grand.
that, but
Right.
no. I don't know.
I said we wouldn't have said it, we just didn't know.
I said no, I just didn't. I would have said 18. But there we go.
No,
that's 23
I think
grand.
it was more, right?
I don't know. I thought it was 9 from the auction and 9 from anyway.
No, and then from your man.
Oh yeah.
23.
23.
You've produced multiple shorts now. Where does 23 grand rank in budgets? Is it in the average, or is it on the low end, higher end?
I think it is probably on the slightly... Let me think, I'm just doing some internal maths. Probably slightly on the kind of higher end. I mean, I've made shorts I made a short for £600, and you probably wouldn't
That was a very short short.
tell. It was 10 minutes, but we just shot it with, we shot, it was a music video, and we just took the money from the music video, went with the cinematographer, the director, 2 actors, a caravan, a camera that we paid for, and then we just shot this kind of improvised short film over a weekend in a caravan park in Skegness and just used all locations that were natural. But I've done like shorts. I think the most expensive short I've done was like 50 grand. So yeah,
Right.
I guess kind of I think on average, probably somewhere in the middle.
Because from a directing perspective, it's never enough money.
It's never.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
it's
like you want to do stuff, and it's like you can't do it.
It's the
So
same.
where's the producing perspective on this one?
I think it's kind of like you sort of do. If we'd had 9 grand, we probably would have made it work. You just basically like are able to not have to beg as hard to get what you want. So you don't have to get the free camera. Or you can just pay. You just pay for stuff. It's incredible. You just pay people to turn up.
Yeah.
You pay for nicer food. You pay for you pay to shoot on 16mm, or you pay to have a ridiculous lighting package. But there's always a way to do it.
Right.
To an extent.
I mean, there is a limit at some point.
I think the line for me is that like, however you do it, it needs to be safe. So if you don't have enough money to make it safe, then don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the kind of bottom line. It's like where things go wrong in our industry is where people cut corners because they don't have enough money to do something safely, and then it all goes terribly wrong. And I think that's the point at which you have to make a call. Like, cool, that's lovely. I'd love to do this, this shot with a car rig, but actually that's unsafe and someone could get hurt, and I don't want to do that. So let's find another way to tell the story. And I'm always coming up with like, I love what you're thinking here with this, but do you need a crane, or could we like maybe go to that top floor of that house and shoot the top shot from up there? Like that's fine. There's always a solution to the kind of vision.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting just to add to that is that when you get finance, which like what you were saying, you end up paying people, but like what I've noticed as a cinematographer, I worked on a few BBC and film 4 shorts, and like suddenly the budget's a lot bigger, but then you're paying everyone, so it kind of ends up the same where you're like, and this is like 40 grand, but we don't have any money because everyone's getting paid, which is amazing that everyone gets paid, but when you're hustling with your friends and you're like on the ground making something,
it's sometimes easier.
You have more money and you have more will and you have more...
and also you've got a bit more freedom, like making that short, which I made years ago with 600 quid, it was like such creative freedom because there was no one there. It was just like, it was a gang of like friends, like we're making the story up as we go along. And I've done that with, some short docs as well, like really, really tiny projects where you don't have anyone really kind of holding you account, which is sometimes really freeing, really kind of rewarding creatively, whereas sort of, obviously the bigger your budgets are and the more you get financiers like the BBC or Film 4 or BFI or whatever on board, then you've got more voices kind of coming into which is obviously also amazing because that, there's a reason they exist to help shape the creative process. But I think there's a sort of feeling amongst new filmmakers that you need all these resources and all this money to kind of make a project and to make something happen. But actually, we're like living in one of the most democratic times for like films. I mean, I think to an extent, I think it's very easy to get your hands on a smartphone and to shoot on a phone and to prove your worth as a director. You don't need like, make a whole short film on Instagram stories, like with a bit of, other stuff. But like, there's ways of telling stories on phones. Like one of the best short films I ever saw was on Snapchat. Just
amazing.
Told on Snapchat. And it was just like, that's genius. That's storytelling. You don't need the fancy stuff.
Do you find... because this sort of brings me to the point of graduating to feature films. I think we all have this desire to want to tell long form stories because you can explore so many more things in them. As storytellers you can, but also career wise you can, and it just opens up doors. But it seems like it's an increasingly harder thing to try and get to do, is to make either your first feature or even your second feature. I know quite a few people that have done micro budget features in the first that even got decent festival runs and they just can't get their second feature made. Do you find the financial environment that this is in, do you find that to be the reason why, or do you find it that there's just too much stuff and nobody wants to take any risks?
What do you mean by financial incentive in that?
Well, feature film needs to make money. They're not, unlike short films, which are primarily promotional material, they're not really supposed to make money.
Well, I think the British film industry, I mean, it depends what which angle you're going from, but obviously I'm sort of a bit like, all hail the public funders, because actually they aren't investing in talent for financial gain, because if they were, we wouldn't have made a single film in the UK in the last 10 years, because no film in the UK really makes its money back, apart from like some exceptional examples. Blue Story being one of them, a very like incredible film that broke out and managed to have an incredible box office run, but like the majority of indie features in the UK don't make money, and that's just part of the remit of public funding. It's like there's a kind of cultural incentive over a financial incentive. And I think that's kind of exciting and very beneficial to us as filmmakers. It does mean that it's incredibly competitive, and it means that, there's more people fighting for those spots than there are available slots.
Do you think the democratization of technology and stuff has added to the competition at that point?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I just think there's so many people wanting to make film. It's such a booming industry. Like it's kind of it's like a both really exciting time to do it, but also kind of slightly terrifying, because there's so many competing elements, of just like, but then we're also in a time where like, I think, I don't know. I think it really just depends on what kind of films you're gonna make, and like that kind of price point and the financial incentive. I don't know. I kind of can't really imagine, like at this point in my career, making any of the kind of indie debuts I'm working on ever make any money back. That would be like a joy if they did, but I'm quite like prepared to like be like, thanks for the cash, guys.
Right.
I've made a very fantastic film, and it's played some brilliant festivals, and it's like doing the thing of sort of having the prestige, which is almost more valuable for a director at the first point in their career than the financial money, because those prestigious drama directors or fiction directors then go on to do bigger projects, which then
commercials,
that go and have that value and that currency. So it's kind of a long, totally backwards business model game. Fine into it. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, the cinema is like it's kind of a weird time as well, because it all feels like so in flux with all the streamers. It's like, what's going on really? Where is cinema going? The actual cinema itself.
As directors, clearly storytelling is sort of at the forefront of the thinking of the director. Do you find the environment you're in is potentially stifling to storytelling, or like, because the streamers thing is sort of the big open question, right? Like they seem to be commissioning a lot of content, a lot of original content, as opposed to what studios and big companies do, who focus on sequels and remakes and blah blah blah. Do you worry that might be the case? That's this current environment is stifling storytelling? Please, both of you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, in the last few years, the world has changed in terms of where a film can sort of go once it's out, and in some ways that can be liberating for some projects, that will find their feet in a place that maybe wasn't there before, whether it's streaming or just online video or something, or like. But then then there's a saturation of like that can sort of bog you down. You can kind of be like, is my project going to get lost in the fray? Like there's so much going on. But I think like as a sort of storyteller, as a director, or writer, or filmmaker, like you just have to have almost. It's like almost parallel to like when you're on set. I find it like there's a kind of tornado of stuff going on, and that can be on set and in the market of where your film's going. But you have to kind of put these binoculars on and just focus in on why you're doing it rather than what's it all for. Do you know what I mean? Because that cliche, like you do it for the process, not the final product. But like I feel like when you're in it, you're just doing it because you see it this way and you want it to be the best it can be, and you're with everyone to make it the best. And where it's going is important, because the whole point of it is to connect with other people and to share that experience, or to make people feel something in whatever way you're trying to make them feel. But I find it where it's such a tornado now of like that, like it's almost easier to just keep your head down in the work, like in the art of it, and trust in yourself that if
the opportunity comes,
that if the material really speaks in the way that you want it to, it will find its place. Do you know what I mean? And if you can worry yourself into the ground, like, where's this going to go? Is it going to be straight streaming? Is it going to get cinema on? Is it going to go into these festivals? Is it going to make any money? Like, but at the end of the day, I think you've just got to...
You can't worry about
that stuff because you've got enough going on with taking it from like here to there, and like the rest is like, it's not, it almost sounds ignorant, but it's not important, but there's only so much I think you can take, and like when you're with the storytellers or the filmmakers, you know, you put everything into just getting it there, and then you almost have to let it go, don't you? And then so it's up to these other people, the marketing, finance,
let the producers produce.
But like, you know, you can have a good say in where it goes and where you feel it's right, but you almost like, you know, every project we do, there comes a point where you've given everything to it and you do kind of let it go. And it's great when it comes back around. It's like, oh my god, it's in this festival, I was going on this, and I was nominated for this, or it's going, you know, full cinematic run, like the theatrical run, but you've almost let go of it by then, and it's almost, any of that is almost a bonus because you're kind of on to the next thing, like, and that's how filmmakers operate a lot of the time.
How about you? Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think you can't get bogged down by the noise. I think like, and I also think you could chase trends, or you could be like, Netflix, like, let's try and make something for Netflix. But like, if you chase the trend is going to change. And
by the time you get there,
I think the finances and people who want to make films are excited by filmmakers, and that's something that everyone needs to remember, is that like, you are the filmmaker. So if you're stoked by an idea, then like they're gonna be as stoked as you know, because you can speak about it in a way that like is as exciting as it would be on screen, kind of thing.
Are all three of you aiming at feature films in the near future, or are you going to give this a longer road and say, hey, look, whenever it happens?
No, I'm actively getting into features, so I have quite a few that I'm sort of in development with, hoping to try and shoot something next year. One of them then depends which pops first, but I have this terrible feeling they're all going to happen exactly the same time.
No, never.
That never happens. It's like a producer's biggest worry. It's like, I have all these projects and they all seem to be going at the same speed, and then are they all going to shoot at the same time, and then how am I going to manage? But
that's a good problem.
It's a good problem, and I don't think it's a real problem. I think. But no, that's the sort of trajectory for next year. I sort of made a promise to myself that I wouldn't do any more short films. I said that last year, and I ended up doing, as I said, 3 this year.
Oh yes, the accident. I want to know how you accidentally produced 3 films in a year.
What was the third one actually? Oh no, I think it was only one of them was a documentary. So it was a new fund came up with Netflix to do a documentary short.
Right.
And I got very enamoured by the story of it, that I kind of was like, can't really say no to this.
Right.
And it was a nice budget, and then the other one was we were meant to shoot last year, and it was meant to have been finished by now, but then the pandemic happened and it shifted and shot like the first week of January, and I was like, oh, that's not the plan. It was meant to shoot last year, and then I could have this year free and finish it, and then, you know, we waited a whole year to do pickups based on talent availability, and so now we're shooting, finishing that in December. So that's hopefully the last one. I think I did something else, but no, can't remember. Having memory loss.
Is there something you're aiming at for your feature? So
we just started casting my feature this week, which is exciting, kind of mad that it's happening.
Financing already in place and everything?
Mostly in place. It was written during I wrote it during the pandemic.
Right.
So it's kind of happened quite quickly.
That is very quickly, yeah.
Hoping to shoot next year, but we'll see what happens.
Nice. What's your projected shooting length? How many weeks are you getting?
Pushing for 6, maybe 5.
Probably 4.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's exciting. That's cool. Drama,
yeah.
Wicked.
Yeah.
Similarly inspired by this one, or a different topic?
I'd say it's got similar themes in it. It's like looking at like how we teach each other to have sex as young humans, navigating that kind of like world of.
I was actually going to ask you about that. I saw in an interview that you used an intimacy coordinator for these scenes. What was that like? Because I know I've had I had a film that I made a few years ago, 2008 it was, which had very sexually sort of graphic moments, but very comedic, you know. And it was an interesting process trying to figure out the intimacy between two actors. But that was something that I had to learn along with the actors that I was working with. So I was wondering what it was like working with an intimacy coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, Sorcha pushed it the most because you got to talk with someone to speak about it. It was honestly one of the most amazing experiences. Like, for me, like I was like, before I was like, yeah, it's fine. Like, oh, we'll just like figure it out on the day. Like, very naive about it. And actually, the way they work, which they like unattach emotion from the scene. So they look at animals having sex, or you know, they're like, what are you? Are you a lion? Are you a seal? Are you a wolf? Like, what character are you? And count the beats of this rhythm of this animal. And like, they were like literally watching seals have sex on YouTube, being like, look at the way he moves. Like, this person moves. That's like slow and just like making that person a character and like developing that sex scene as like something that is not yourself. And
like a stunt coordinator in a way.
Exactly. It's exactly the same principle. It's like, you know, you'd have someone do a stunt, you'd have someone do a dance, you'd have someone do sex. I mean, they're the same thing. It's the same thing. It's like, you don't just like do a
throw
sex
people
scene.
into it.
And I think that's a really, I mean, it's totally a new thing. The intimacy coordinating business is a very like much needed thing, but for so long, you know, directors and we're just sort of like, okay, you just now you have sex, and it's like, I don't think it's how it works, especially because sex is so rooted in power and it's about power struggles, and like there is going to be power on set, and if you can't disassociate the emotion from that, and you can't disassociate the power play that might exist between two actors who might not even know each other, but you know, some of the sex scenes we did, they would have turned up on the day and just done them, and we would have been weirdly figuring it out.
And his role is only to like the guy that, I mean, it's in there for a flash in the film, the assault, but the guy who did that assault is only there to do that one like clip, and for him it's like an awful job. Like you have to turn up to set and you have to assault someone on screen in front of all these crew members. Like it, and he was the most fearful of it. You know, of course it was hard for Jasmine, but she had a bigger role to play. She had an understanding of what it was. For him, he's got to turn up into this room. He's like, what the, you know, like, it's really difficult for the assaulter as much as it is.
I guess in the film, it's like fragmented, like it's sort of fragmented sort of visuals of Jasmine's kind of reliving something, whereas for him, he can't fragment it in the moment of shooting it, or
of course.
So he has to be that fully, like.
I've done a lot of work with him since as well. I shot a TV show last year which was about sex work, and just like the way, I just can't even imagine working without them now. It's it would be such a different set and toxic set, but because of that, I hate to think what happened before.
Yeah, me too. I mean, we know what happened before. Like, the actors and producers almost kind of were completely traumatized by that experience of not having someone. I think that was part of the impetus of like creating a safe space.
Yeah, I mean, it was on set as well.
Well, I read that as well. Yeah, I mean, in our case, it was very much that we rehearsed, and I like rehearsing. I've always found that there's not enough rehearsing in film, and my short film's a two-hander, you know, so there was no other characters to play off of or anything like that, but we shot on 35mm anamorphic, which means it was a big crew and it's all set in this retro future, right? So it's very abstract building, but it was comedic. We had to time it, you know, we had to time the whole movement between the two people. And the character's a sex robot, you know what I mean? And she bought him to put them together like IKEA furniture, and basically, you know, had to use them, and she has multiples in her closet, you know. So that the whole idea was all very sort of silly, Jetsons-esque, abstract, funny, you know. But I had to choreograph it with them, and of course, initially when we first did the first moments, they were definitely uncomfortable. But as we sort of went through it, and you know, we found ways for them to like connect. And also, my guy, he has no lines. He was a dancer, so he was very comfortable in rehearsing physical movements and going through that. And you know, she wasn't the dancer, but she was certainly comfortable once she realized what they could do. But that took a process before shooting. Yeah. You know, like you can't do it on set, just like, hey, okay, go ahead.
And I think that was the problem and that was the sort of expectation before, and this, it is a really very recent thing in the film industry.
It clearly came out of the Me Too explosion, right? So it's like the moment that came out.
But before, I think it was before then, actually, the sort of seeing intimacy corner. I think they've probably been around for longer, but I think sort of just like, I don't need them. Same way it's like, it's fine. So there's these old ways of working in the film industry that as soon as you actually realise that is a terrible idea, I can't believe we've been doing that for so long. Like, don't get me started on blanks.
It's almost a shame. It's almost a shame that like sometimes it has to be championed by someone that everyone sees as great to then be formatted into, like, for example, I feel like Michaela Cole's series, she really championed. She took the time to champion the intimacy coordinator about that project, and now suddenly everyone's like, this is really cool, like let's have it. Whereas before no one cared, like, and it was like, we'll just do it. Like,
I mean, still have been on set recently where people have been like, but why?
I mean, if you look into history, how long it took for there to be chaperones for children when they're working on screen, it took years before they gave any kind of crap about the kids' well-being when they shoot anything. It took years and years and years before.
I didn't know that.
It took a long time until parents basically were like, dude, you can't do this to my kid. It's just or the other way around. A lot of times the parents push their kid really hard because exactly, and that kind of thing. So when the regulations were introduced for that, but of course that's been around for a long time now. But just on a fundamental basis, the film industry tries to get away with whatever it can to save money, save time, save whatever. But the good thing is that at least the film industry is introspective enough to do things about it when the time comes. The guns thing is, unfortunately, I mean, it is an American problem. It is that whole thing is definitely an American issue.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I think similar stuff's happened in the UK and we're ignoring it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because every set I've ever been on where there were guns, none of them were real. They were all replica. And you couldn't fire them if you wanted to. Some of them were just wooden blocks, So I've never had an actual gun on set, even though I've...
Oh no, I have, and it's absolutely terrifying, and it's completely unnecessary.
It is unnecessary.
Like,
they're fantastic replica guns that work really well. That you can even put like an explosive squib into it, but it won't fire anything. It can't fire anything. It's not made for that. But you have to hire those, and you have to hire the people that have those. And if you just want to do it on the quick, I've got a gun, it's fine. It's just obviously it's a complete disregard for safety.
I think it is so important to have those people on set and on projects that are there to do their job in terms of facilitating safety, because with filmmaking, like for good or for bad, there is an emotional attachment to what you're doing and the material from some people that are very in power on that project, whether it be a director or something. There is and that drive to make it authentic, or to make it the best it can be, or the most realistic. Unfortunately, there will be slips in people like where they're not thinking about safety, and you need those people there to be like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. I know you want to make the best film. I know you want it on screen to be like, this is so the most realistic thing I've ever seen, and that gives you merit in a sense. But if you don't have those people to go, I don't care what the end product is, I'm just here to make sure that you're safe. If you don't have those people, then it's only a matter of time for something awful.
It's just gonna happen. It's just gonna, right? Okay, let's cheer this topic up a little bit. I'm gonna make it my last question, and then we'll wrap it up. You mentioned in an interview that there are directing styles, but there aren't clear producing styles. So I was wondering...
Didn't I say that?
Yes, you did. I am not. This is an interview I saw. But it wasn't actually an interview for this film, it was for an older short.
Okay.
And I was wondering, because you mentioned in that your producing style is making things that matter, making things that are important.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that as to how you choose projects?
Yeah. I think for me, when I was starting out making projects, I always wanted to kind of put characters on screen that I hadn't really seen, and a lot of that kind of came from kind of queer representation and looking at LGBT characters and trying to push the kind of the stories that I've not seen at all. And it's like, well, I'm just going to keep trying to put those people on screen. And I think now I can't be that kind of pigeonholed. And so now when I'm kind of looking at new projects, it doesn't necessarily have to be a particular type of genre. Like I'm doing a rom-com, I'm doing a sort of thriller, I'm doing a a comedy, which I never thought I would do. And like, I think, but the thing that those three things have in common is that these characters haven't been given screen time. These characters need to have space to kind of exist. And these stories are all going to start a conversation, even though one's kind of silly, but it's going to start a conversation about pregnancy. One's going to start a conversation about the refugee crisis. One's going to start a conversation about being gay and being a teenager in America, and like all of these things in their own way matter. And I don't think it necessarily means that I'm like super issue based. I don't always want to make films that have like issues like rooted at the heart, because I want people. It's not about being. I'm not preaching to a choir, but I would love to make work that kind of like has the ability to incite change and to start conversations and to like shapeshift and agitate and culturally agitate and make people be sort of stop and think, oh, I didn't think about that. That's interesting. So yeah, I guess.
So is that what sort of drives you when you consider a project?
Yeah, it's
that's
like,
interesting.
yeah, I'm really interested in seeing characters that like just do really surprising things and do really kind of odd things and do really,
right.
And I like seeing characters that often are sort of praised be really vilified, or kind of, I'd really like to see like really dangerous, villains that aren't always seen as villains, or vice versa. And I like being able to, I think, to break out of what is expected, I think.
How do you describe your directing style, if you could? I know it's not an easy question, but I'm gonna make you.
I think coming from cinematography, it like lies in like a cinematic approach of like trying to tell something important, but in like a way that is breaking form rather than like naturally. Does that make sense? Like trying to like tell stories in exciting new ways rather than tell stories like as factual, like dramas kind of thing.
Maybe if you had to pick some adjectives to describe it, maybe that would help.
I want to tell important stories. I want to tell cinematic stories, and that's kind of it.
Important and cinematic.
Yeah,
sounds good to me. How about you?
Yeah, sort of wincing at that question as well. Because I guess when you haven't been doing it for, I guess even after you've been doing films, it's hard to retrospect yourself on what your style is.
Which is why I like asking that question.
But I would just say, I'm very interested in, telling stories that, that move people. Like, I feel like I want to. You always want to almost create what you've kind of felt, if you know what I mean. Like it goes back to the question about the sea of stuff streaming. There's so much stuff these days, but there's always that few things that like stay with you for months or a year, and they retain, and like what separates that from everything else and the craft of it. And so I guess directing style, I would say, I'm interested in empathy and the stories that really mean something and really move people. And I love nothing more than when there's a film that moves someone that they're not someone that gets moved, but then if you can move that person, then you've done something that's really incredible. And then onto a more maybe stylistic thing, I love visual storytelling. Like the directors I love always have a real strong visual form, and I'm very interested in how psychological can be represented on screen and sort of mixed in with, traditional narrative drama, but then heightened moments maybe of like, because everyone's got something going on in their head, and we can never see what that is, but cinema is almost the best way of showing it. And I find that really interesting.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. It was a fun interview, even though it was ad hoc, improvised in my apartment. And I wish you all the best with the films coming up and with your next projects in the near future. Thank you very much for joining me here.
Thank you
very much.